We're a little bit overdue, but thanks for hanging in there with us, everybody. I will call this meeting of the Economic Development portion of this joint meeting to order for Wednesday, April 8th, 2020. Two members of the committee are in chambers and three are with us via WebEx. Lisa, do you want to call your meeting to order?
Yep, this time I'll call the finance portion of this meeting to order for Wednesday, April 8th, 2020. Can we confirm which members of the committee have attended in person in chambers?
I'm sorry, I didn't catch that. Was that?
Yeah, she wants to confirm who's here from the committee in chambers.
Okay. In the ED, it is I and...
No, in finance. I need to know which finance members we have present in the chamber.
That would be Mr. Smith, Ms. Lawrence.
And that's it for finance
That's it.
in the
That's it.
chamber.
Everyone else is virtual. Okay. And we'll take all the finance votes by roll call, and we'll recognize that Lawrence and Smith are attending in person. Thank you.
Okay.
With that, if we're ready to call the first item on the agenda, the first item on our agenda is discussion and possible action on the deferral of interest and principal payments on city-funded loans and ground lease payment of small businesses impacted by COVID-19 for a period not to exceed 1 year. We're getting this item on a refer back from council. A few council members were concerned that we didn't have defined criteria for the deferrals. So we'll need to talk that out here and make some decisions later.
Sure. So,
Chris, if you want to start us off on that.
yeah, this came, from the administration's effort to address, obviously, challenges to small businesses. There's going to be a variety of things that we're hoping to deploy as soon as possible to help businesses. I also want to, before we get into talking about the deferral of loans, I also just want to note that we also expect to receive an allocation of additional funds from HUD for block grant resources, which could be also used to help small businesses. We've been awarded $370,000 or so dollars for that purpose, and we have a timeline that we've fleshed out to that will work on reallocating that. As you know, those funds will be reprogrammed by the Community Advisory Committee, which will then make a recommendation to a future Finance Committee meeting. And we're expecting to kind of put out on the street shortly, the application process for those funds, and that will be available to nonprofits and to organizations, who would use those funds for qualified purposes related to block grant. And then we would have a public hearing, of course, with the Community Advisory Committee, and we're expecting that around the end of April. And then, hopefully to finance in mid-May, and then to council in mid-May as well, and hopefully be able to allocate those resources as soon as possible, likely as early as late May, depending on when we get final rules from HUD and final processes and kind of determination about how to spend those resources. So I just wanted to give that update as tangent to, then this item, which is really the crux of the discussion about, ways in which we can help small businesses immediately. There are a variety of different public policy things that have gone on at the federal level and some at the state level to help small businesses. From the administration perspective, we felt that one of the best ways that we can help small businesses right away, even though we are going to deploy some additional loan funds, is to be able to defer interest and payments on the existing loans that the city has. So as you know, we have a variety of loans, mostly with small businesses, of course, and we lease ground to certain small businesses as well. And during this time, we wanted to be able to defer all of those, interest and payments. That means that the interest would continue to accrue, and that, they would, obviously pay that when the deferment period ends. As you recall, in the council meeting we had previously when we were talking about this topic, there's broader implications if we're going to talk about forgiving portions of loans or things like that, and we can broach that at a future period. It might be important or relevant to talk about depending on how severe, the kind of continued challenges are as the economy struggles to recover from the pandemic. But, at least at this point, we were, kind of recommending that this be, a somewhat easy operation to defer. And, we do intend on deferring, interest and principal on all of the city-funded loans that we have out there at this time. We had phrased it as a case-by-case basis, just in case there was a situation where the primary lender, needed maybe some kind of, different period of time or wish to go, shorter or for whatever reason, there was relevance to do that. So we were just kind of allowing some flexibility in the process. We also noted at the last meeting that the development department already does have some latitude to work with borrowers, and we do all the time to defer loans, in certain pots of money that are not necessarily statutory to come to council. So, for example, the commercial rehab loan program, which is just an advisory of the council, the Economic Development Committee makes a recommendation, but it does not get voted on by the council for those loans because it's a separate pot of money that isn't reviewed by the council. So we already have some functionality to do that, and we have done that over the years for borrowers who need that flexibility. But one thing that we're missing is we don't really have that flexibility for, say, TIF loans. For example, if the project was funded with tax increment financing, then it was backed by a development agreement, and that development agreement is, pretty black and white, and everything in that agreement is within those papers. And so, normally to defer or change, something like that, we would bring it back as an amendment, and we didn't want to bring back a whole series of these projects for amendments, because it really isn't an amendment, it's just a deferral of payments for a period of time. And so that's why we felt that this resolution would give the functionality to do that.
Okay, so where we left off though before, and we were interested in those, development agreement holders who need that deferral. The assumption was that they would contact the city to request said deferral, and then case by case, they would get deferred or get approved. I mean, if the intention is to approve all that request, that's fine. And I don't think that we were adverse to that in our last finance meeting, but when we got to council, Alder Tao had some concerns about some kind of criteria that they would meet with their request. And now you had mentioned before that a lot of the criteria that's in use at the WEDC is for new financing, not existing loans.
Exactly. So, and that's why we felt like there wasn't need to discern or determine, some kind of level of review. We're planning to, and we're suggesting to defer interest and principal payments on all city loans. Now, the majority of those loans, all those loans are to what would be considered small businesses, and it's important for them. So we were capturing all of the loans that are out there. I don't think we need to necessarily create any rules. We are creating those rules, and that's why I thought it was important to bring up. We will create those rules when we issue new loans to, for deployment from the block grant allocation. And I think those, guidelines to ensure that the loans are going to businesses that are the smallest or the most neediest is clearly important, and we do need to, ensure that we're doing that. But, that's what we're expecting to do, again, probably with our partnership with McDevco, which handles our loan pots right now, and does, make their loan committee, makes those decisions and allocates that. And so we will bring that methodology back to finance in that May timeline, like we said, May 12th, and expect to be able to review that. And I just want to clarify that that's the time when you're talking about how to deploy new resources. Right now, these are all existing loans that are already structured, they're already made to businesses that are in the community. All we're suggesting is we defer their payments and interests for up to a year, and allow those resources to get out there right away, because it is very important. We've heard from a variety of businesses that will be challenged to make their loan payments, or they'll be making choices about whether they make their city loan payment, or they make, payroll, or they make other costs that are going on right at this kind of key time. And so we'd rather them have those resources available to pay other important things, and defer their city loan payment for a little while longer. Again, the impact there is not severe. It just drags out the period of time in which they'd pay back the loan. But it's an easy way, or a relatively easy way, for us to assist businesses right away.
Okay, so the concern I have is if this item returns to the council for unmodified, are we going to have the same problem that we had 2 weeks ago where it can't pass? And then in the meantime, business owners who need that help are going to wait even longer for it, because right now, they've waited 2 weeks already for us to undertake this process.
Agreed.
With a refer back.
Again, I thought a refer back just to have a rediscussion of it was not a bad idea, just so that there can be additional questions or clarifications. Now, obviously, at the council, we would be clear to explain that it's unnecessary to put restrictions or other rules on this. We're attempting to defer loans, all loans and all ground leases, and it doesn't need to be split into different pots. But
Ms. Lawrence.
of course, yeah, Linda's requesting, yeah.
We'll recognize Linda Lawrence then with a question. Go ahead, Linda.
Thank you, Lisa. After listening to Christian talk a little bit more about the background than what we really had the other night, I would actually be more interested in swinging the other way, in actually just stating that they're all, that we're really approving all of them, unless someone steps forward and says, no, that doesn't work for me, that we're not requiring them to. Because frankly, I would not want to be the mayor, one person, with that case-by-case responsibility on my shoulders, even though I would have good advice from staff, but without any criteria. And I can't even see us, coming up with the perfect criteria list that would work well. I would rather see that we just acknowledge that we're going to do that, unless someone chooses not to, however we could word that.
Yeah, no,
I
we
think
could.
that would be smoother.
We want to put a finite timeline, though, on the length of the
Yes,
deferral. Because
absolutely.
instead of deferring now, are looking at deferring, perhaps the April, May, and June payments, but not a whole lot more. This really gave the leeway, case by case, to do that up to a year, depending on the need of the individual business, to get caught up and dig out from under this shutdown. But I think that we should, if we're going to do that and just put a statement out that says we're going to do it on all, that we should have some timeline where it stops.
Okay, so,
Could I ask how many businesses loans are we talking about, for one thing?
I guess I don't have a total of all the loans that we have, but, there's a variety of loans, dozens of loans.
My feeling, Ms. Lawrence, is that, this is really based on, or should be based on, demonstrable need. And there's going to be varying levels of need, possibly, and that's why our, resolution says up to 1 year. Because somebody might, need 2 or 3 months to kind of really get up and running, and others are going to be hit harder. So that's why I think there has to be sort of a review process to look at what is the level of need and how we respond then.
I don't disagree if it's more than one person, but I do not think it's good administration or fiscal accountability to have this in the lap of one person, to wit the mayor.
I don't
just think
disagree with that.
I think that's too much, especially with no criteria against which to weigh exactly what you're saying. I think it should be either or.
Yeah, and I guess I understand the point there again, but the development department already makes these judgment calls, on a day-to-day basis related to other pots of money. We were just trying to be clear that we were trying to offer this to all loan holders, no matter where their funds came from, so that we would be able to have the flexibility to do that. We certainly don't mind if you wanted to limit it for 3 months and then come back and, kind of reassess the situation, in 3 months' time or even 6 months' time or whatever. But, I think it's very clear by most economic projections that the impact from the pandemic will be severe enough to justify a 1-year deferment, and that would at least be a clean way to manage it. Or at least up to 1 year. But to the point, if there was a business that, maybe didn't need or require that, or their primary lender wasn't deferring their payments for so long, then we could also match that and go with, 3 or 4 months or something like that.
Ms. Grote would like to speak.
And then we have Pat, and then Pat also has his hand raised as well,
I
so.
want to talk too.
I guess just a couple points, just for clarification. Interest is still going to accrue on these loans. So there's really, from a cash flow, I guess, standpoint, maybe a business who could pay would be motivated to not pay. But, they're not saving any money by not paying their loan. And so that interest is just going to accrue. And when they go to start making payments, it's going to just be applying to that interest that's been accruing, not the principal. And so I think, the balance of people using it if they need it is those financial motivations won't be there. I mean, I realize we have a lower rate interest, but, and so they could make decisions to pay a higher interest rate loan than this one. But I do think that all we're doing is preventing them from getting late charges, basically, which we do assess when people are late on their payments. So I do think those motivations, and you could make it for 6 months and then renew that. If you feel uncomfortable with a 1-year deferral, you could say 6 months, and we're going to revisit, the economic situation at that point. That would be another way to feel more comfortable. Just a couple thoughts.
Pat Peckham has his hand raised as well, and then if you want to acknowledge Dennis after.
Okay, Mr. Peckham?
Thank you. I don't know how to unraise my hand. Maybe I can do that. Anyway, my sense from the council was that there was this kind of going to be an ask that the loan, the borrower, be able to show somebody in City Hall some impact from this whole pandemic business, and that the bar wouldn't necessarily be set very high, but that some impact be shown, and then the deferral would be granted. And I don't want this. I would like that to happen, but I don't want it to be an administrative burden. And so I was wondering, I don't know if Chris can zoom us in anymore on how many of these loans are out there. He mentioned dozens. Is that 30, 40, 50?
Yeah, that's a good point. I don't have the number right in front of me. I can figure that out, obviously. But I guess the key would be, look, I think and we thought of this as well. We had discussed it internally, what would be the process of, trying to discern, who is, but I think it's fair enough to say, given the gravity of the economic projections, that all the businesses that we have loans with are going to have some impact from the pandemic. And so I don't believe necessarily that we have to slice it too thin. Some businesses may be impacted more than others. And to Mary Ann's point, those that are less impacted, it's in their best interest to pay back their loan because they're not accruing interest. So they will self-select, obviously, if they feel that they can make their payments to the city. It's in their best interest. if they do feel that they would benefit from this deferral for whatever reason, because they're paying a higher loan off, because they're trying to make payroll or pay rent or utilities, then I think that's, that's a good use of, of our ability to do this, the flexibility that we have with these loans. Because again, these loans come from pots of money that don't necessarily have to be repaid immediately. We want them repaid, but it's not like, it's not like we have to go pay the bank, this money. It will go back into the pots in which it came from, and likely be reloaned.
Okay, if I could jump back in here. Right now, our resolution says it's going to be done on a case-by-case basis. Do we want to change that and just say all the loans that are currently out there for the city? Or
Yeah, I'm fine with that. If you're okay, then we would say, all loans, and up for a period not to exceed whatever the committees wish tonight to recommend. If you'd like a little shorter amount of time, but again, I think, go ahead.
I think 6 months makes sense. I think that some businesses may recover faster than others once things open up, we're not sure. And we certainly could take a second look at it then. 6 months would put us out into October. And so then we'd have a little better economic assessment as far as what's happening for those borrowers that have borrowed our funds. Did I hear in the chamber that Dennis Smith has a hand up? Or no?
Correctamundo.
Okay, go ahead, Dennis.
I'm a little concerned. We have, as I read the resolution, it says authorizing the mayor to approve payment deferrals on existing city-provided loans to commercial properties and businesses for up to 1 year. So that would appear to me that everybody who's got a loan with us is going to get a pass.
Correct.
Correct.
They get a deferment, yeah.
Okay, get a deferment. Now, let's talk about deferments. Does this mean that if the loan was due to be paid off, let's say in 2021, we're going to push it out that he's got to 2022 to pay it?
Correct. They may. It will continue to accrue interest, and then they will pay that off. It's still,
Okay. So they would pay more interest under this program than they would if we wouldn't have entered, if nothing would have happened, everything would have been normal and so on.
correct.
Okay.
But, again, it's a cash flow crunch time, so we're trying to say, if we know you need the cash flow now, and so we're welcome to defer, this, at this key period.
Well, I'm all for helping small business. This is an unusual situation, but I'm concerned that we don't know if all of these people have been impacted negatively. Some people have could be impacted positively. If I was making widgets, all of a sudden we've got a big demand for widgets, my business could be taking off. I maybe don't even need any assistance.
Correct.
Now,
And
you're
it's
going to leave
your-
it up to me, so you're going to come to me and say, listen, you don't have to pay us anything for a year. I can make a decision and say, well, I look at the interest, I look at what I can take this money and I can invest it somewhere, I can do something else with it. I might say, I don't really need this money, but I'm going to take this anyway. I would like to see this go to the people that really need it to keep operating. And, how is this going to impact our finances? Are we depending on this money coming back in so we could reloan it out and so on to other businesses?
That's what I said, eventually, yes, but there's no immediacy to these, this, by deferring the payment, we're not, Mary Ann can address if she wishes.
So I think, this could be a point of clarification too. So we have loans that have been issued, because we're not talking about individuals, right? We're only talking businesses here.
Correct,
So
we're
we
individual
have like
businesses.
two, what I would call pots of money. One is rental loans. So you're going to include those, Chris, in that?
Sorry, commercial rehab loans? or
Yeah,
which
well,
loans?
commercial rehab, and then we have rental rehab. Are you including rental rehab in your?
Yes, we were saying all city loans, yeah.
Okay, so those are
Not
in
for-
revolving loan funds, and so as Chris pointed out, if we don't get paid, we can't generate new loans for others. And the same with the commercial rehab is basically a revolving loan fund. The loans that were issued for the tax increment districts, the districts are expecting that money back. It goes, and then we need to collect less increment to, for the district. So, in theory, we're still going to collect all of our money and perhaps a little bit more because more interest will have been accumulating.
That's right, yeah.
But it definitely, as you look at, for example, deficits in the district, it could create the district deficits to be higher at the end of 2020 than our original projections, because we won't have
Correct.
collected that loan payment back.
And ground leases would be the same.
Right.
In
Ground
theory,
leases would be
again,
the
but
same.
it's helping these businesses at this key time. And we can split hairs about how to discern them. That was the language about case by case. If we felt that there was a business that was making, masks, and we said, well, do you really need the deferment? You seem to be doing pretty well selling Lysol or masks right now. Okay, but, in general, I think as a legislative question, again, this is not, this is a resolution that's just empowering, us to, to go ahead and implement it. We didn't want to get into legislating every possible scenario and figuring out which, widgets, this widget is good and this widget isn't good. I think there's going to be a lot of economic impact, so we felt that it was, fairly simple to say that we would defer, all these payments for that time.
I do have a list of like the tax increment district loans. So that would be, we have loans outstanding with Metro Plains, with Trolley Quarter Flat. And some of these loans would be written off because they're forgivable loans. We have with Wausau on the Water, Blanker, Bricks, Thunderlube, World Market, and Bull Falls. Those are our tax increment district loans. And the individuals or the businesses that are involved. So I don't have a listing of the commercial rehab loans
Yeah, and then
or
there's
the,
a variety of commercial rehab loans, which is Downtown Grocery and Terradea and all those places, all the.
Ms. Rasmussen, just for your information, Alder Lawrence does have her hand up, too.
Okay, let's recognize Linda's question, and then I have a question about, I do like the idea of keeping maybe a 6-month leash on this, and then revisiting it in 6 months to see where we're at. Go ahead, Linda, with your question.
Great. Question for Christian, I guess. Were you implying that you're looking for legislative permission to go forward, but that staff would actually have some criteria in the future? Because I'm not paranoid, I've never been to law school, but without that, I'm still concerned that somebody would be denied, because we think, well, your widgets are gangbusters right now. But
Well,
without that,
Again, we
they
balance
could
that.
say, hey, lawsuit time,
No, I
you
under-
discriminated, it's not equal
Again,
treatment.
there's always that situation, but to Dennis's point, and, it's exciting to, to agree with Dennis on this topic, but I'm just saying, like, we would have some ability to, make a discernment. We're saying on a case-by-case basis, we would evaluate the situation. We already do that. Like I said, on commercial rehab loans, we already tried to make that discernment. And that borrower, I suppose, can claim that the city is not giving them deference or is not listening to their concerns. But again, we have to try to make that judgment call. And we do it in collaboration with the primary lender and understanding their finances. You don't know that because it wouldn't be even palatable or possible to haul that through a committee and council structure where then you were going to discern who was what and what situation they were facing and why the loan was being deferred and what the primary lender was doing and all the ministerial details. So that's why it doesn't happen that way, and I'm not suggesting necessarily that it should. So we phrased it originally with the case-by-case basis. But I also can appreciate, to your other point is, well, why not make it clean and just say all loans, 6 months, don't worry about discerning, okay? But then you do have the situation where someone might benefit greater than someone else because they're not in as bad a situation, yet they still take the deferment. But the point is they're paying interest during that time. We're getting more money back, in the end. And, if they really feel that they want to use that deferment for whatever reason, then it's still a reasonable resource to have out in the community. And I think one of the things, I've worked in, kind of disaster areas previously, as some of you know, but I think one of the things in response to the Great Recession was when you try to create a lot of rules about getting the money out and it takes longer and you're trying to ensure that everyone is treated fairly, that effort is often, blunted by the fact that you really just needed to get as much resources to as many people as you can as quickly as possible, given the gravity of the situation. And I think that businesses now are in a very grave situation, and I don't mean to overplay that, but I believe that's certainly the case, and I think it's going to get worse before it gets better. Most of the projections this year are pretty severe for business impact. So I'm not sure there are a lot of businesses locally, at least the ones with our loans, that are going to really benefit because we don't have a loan with, with Lysol Corporation, for example,
Subject number 2 then tied to this really also hinges around who makes that decision. And I understand Linda's point about saying that's an awful lot to ask of one mayor, regardless of who he or she might be. I think that what we need to take into account is what the public perception of the mayor making those decisions unilaterally might be. And I think that if the Community Development Department is already making those decisions for deferrals on other loan programs, that to be consistent, those same department individuals should be making the decisions on these, because I think if you push that responsibility off or allow that responsibility to fall to the mayor, someone somewhere is going to accuse that mayor of liking business A better than business B, or doing a favor for someone somewhere. And I think that the optics of that is challenging. So if the staff is already making those decisions on other programs, I would prefer that the staff make the decisions on these also and not empower the mayor to do that.
I am in agreement with Alder Rasmussen. I think we just need to consider what we're doing here is setting a policy and then leaving the administrative details to those who normally would do it, and not bury ourselves in those administrative details here at the committee level. I would, just to keep, yes, but could I speak too, please? Thank you. I know, I saw. My train of thought, just trying to keep it, on track. I'd just like to see us, okay, well, I lost my train of thought, thank you.
It's okay.
You left the
Mr. Smith, would
station
you like
over
to
there.
speak?
Okay, well, you get your train back on the track. I'll talk a little
Michael
bit.
is also,
Okay.
Michael Martins has also requested to speak.
I don't have any problem with doing this for 6 months and coming back and reviewing it, but I do think staff should review on a case-by-case basis. When somebody comes to the city for a loan, we must do some kind of review on them.
That's right, we do,
We just
yeah.
don't say, approved, and here's your buck, and have a nice day.
Yeah.
So I don't see any reason why, if we're going to defer these loans, and some of them, who knows, the majority of them will need assistance, that we go ahead and do it. But I still think making a blanket one, throwing a wide net and say, well, everybody gets it, somebody out there who's doing well is going to say, I wonder why they're doing this to me.
Yeah.
Maybe I should do it, or maybe I shouldn't do it. Also, one other question, is this policy going to impact the loans that we're talking about for item 2 and 3? As far as deferment goes.
So, yes, I guess they could. I mean, these loans might not even be made, we're not exactly sure when we'll actually cut this loan. So if it's a 6-month period, it might, have just started anyways. But, in theory, yes. If you'd like to do all loans, and I can appreciate the elegance of that, the simplicity of it. And, Linda, maybe, as a former mayor, especially, you can appreciate more than most, the complexities of trying to weigh these things. But when we say mayor, we're really saying the administration. We all work for the mayor. The staff is making a call on the loan, determinations, and we are doing it now. And if That's why we chose the case-by-case basis language, because we felt that that was flexible enough to allow, some discernment, some, discussion with their primary lender, some review of their financials if necessary, some discernment of how impacted by COVID-19 are you really, like those questions could be asked and could be determined, and then, kind of ferreted out, but.
Mr. Martins has his hand up.
Me?
Mike
Mr. Martins?
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Tom. I'm more on an agreement with Alder Lawrence on this one, and I think that we need to just offer blanket deferrals for all of the existing loans. If a business wants to opt out of it, they can certainly opt out of it if they're doing fine. They know what their financial status is, their financial situation. So they know that the interest is still going to accrue, and they'll have to pay that. So even if they're doing good and they take the deferral, then it's on them. And but I don't believe that we should kind of get into the minutiae of trying to figure out which businesses need the deferral, which ones do not. Offer the deferral, and then it's up to them to decide if I'm going to take the deferral or if I'm gonna leave the deferral because I'm doing well, and then just leave it and then keep it at a 6-month time period. After 6 months, we can read it, we can review and renew if need be.
Ms. Lawrence?
I don't have my wording. I was prepared to amend the resolution.
This puts me back on my train track.
Okay, go ahead.
I wanted to get to the point where rather than, discussing, forever,
Right.
I wanted to get in an actionable state of mind here and have
Excellent.
somebody make a motion with particulars and have somebody second it so we can maybe act on it.
Did you have that
Okay.
wording in mind? Because I will turn my mic off.
Pat is
I should not do that
actually
myself.
may have an idea.
I would, on behalf of the Economic Development Committee, I would make a motion that we pass the resolution as presented, but with the proviso that the extension be for 6 months and go from there.
Well, the resolution as presented really is, we don't have one as presented other than a rehash
Okay.
or a repro of what was originally passed.
So-
So this still does not have the ground lease
The packet
language.
says case-by-case basis, and I think that the procedure, as several members mentioned, offer it to everybody and know that the Community Development Office is going to be inclined to quickly say yes and not, quibble about impact and go to town.
Okay, so to be clear, is that motion, because I'll accept the same one from finance if that's what this is it to defer all loans and ground lease payments with the understanding that interest continues to accrue for a period of 6 months to be re-reviewed at the end of the 6 months, and that the decision on those is to be made by the Community Development Department that manages the loans and not the mayor? Is that clear? Is that where you're going?
I would go there, I would change the wording slightly to say that we would offer the deferral to everybody, rather than just do it.
So, Mr. Peckham, are you including or excluding the idea of a case-by-case basis?
The case-by-case basis would remain in there, but the understanding would be that the Community Development Office would not quibble if somebody came in and said, hey, I need this.
Well, certainly. And we all know what the spirit of this is, so.
So they would make the offer across the board, honor the ones that want it, and the ones that don't would continue to pay.
Right, for 6 months.
Again, does this include, when I say case-by-case basis, does this mean on a review basis? Or are we just saying, here it is, it's yours? That's just the fine line we have to
Sunset in
say.
6 months, and we would renew it if needed.
Is there a review aspect initially?
There would be, I guess, the wording, I'm not bothered by the wording of the case-by-case basis, because we understand that the overwhelming inclination is going to be to grant the deferral.
Sure. Okay, if everybody understands Mr. Peckham's amended resolution, if you will, do I have a second in ED? I have a second from Mr. Gisselman. Mr. Smith has something to say?
Okay, this has been so convoluted, even I'm confused. So what we're saying is, we're going to offer it to everybody who's got a city loan with us, and even some people may not at present have a city loan, but will maybe have one in the future, within this 6-month timeframe. And we're going to have city staff review it, but they're really not going to turn anybody down. If the guy says they need it, they're going to need it. They're not really going to verify anything if the person really needs it. Is that what we're doing?
I would say review is review. And if they are reviewed on a case-by-case basis, then, you know, the relative validity of their request would be taken into account by staff who do this all the time.
Well, I believe Mr. Peckham used the term "will not quibble" with the person's needs. So, Pat, define quibble for us.
I don't think that's going to be
I guess it would be, you know, the understanding would be that, you know, the way they're doing it now is that they have a chat with the person and they don't, you know, demand their financials 6 years back, that they, you know, and the direction from the committee is going to be to make this happen and offer it to anybody who.
So, in other words,
Given the
really,
fact that they'll continue to pay, given the fact that they would continue to accrue interest, this actually would end up costing the borrower money if they take advantage of it over time. If the
Correct.
interest continues to accumulate, so.
Correct. It's in their interest to not take it.
Okay. Ms. Grote, is that the stand?
Well, I'm always sensitive to staff workload too, so if you're going to give it to everyone, I don't understand the purpose of making staff do all this work when you're going to give it to everyone. So, you know, I guess I would advocate, if you want to be generous in this, that you would just say it's a 6-month deferral. We're not preventing anyone from paying, we're just deferring it.
There's a lot
You know,
of
and I would
simplicity
say-
in that, yeah.
Yes.
Can I
and
say though,
would
can I say
too
though that we do have a resolution on the floor that has been seconded?
Okay,
Okay, so what you're doing now is talking counter to that, and
I am, yes.
so.
Okay.
What's the
right, well,
wording? What's the
although-
exact
We
wording of what we're approving?
re-articulate Pat's motion.
If staff could maybe give us their best shot at the wording.
Sure, so, I mean, I guess, to highlight Mary Ann's point and some of the previous issues is, the case by case would be, would leave that interpretation to staff. And if you're so inclined to allow us, I think in most cases, we don't quibble, but it does allow us to quibble if there is a question or something that, is needs to be better discussed or better understood, or work with their primary lender or something like that. And so, perhaps it's cleanest if you just say, again, back to our original intention is case-by-case basis, but, we are under the impression that all of these loans will be deferred in one way or another, because we are trying to cast a wide net of support for small businesses.
In other words, administering a program.
Exactly, so.
Mr.
and-
Mayor?
Okay, I've been listening back and forth, and there's a lot of good input, but there's also some things from my end. Number one, as being the mayor right now, and who knows, after next week, it might not be the case. That's not fair to the other person coming in. I would also agree with what Mrs. Rasmussen said. From the mayor's standpoint, it's going to look like favoritism, or that person's going to be lobbied to death. I think it should be done on an administrative staff type of view. I would agree with Mary Ann. Our staff does a lot, and I'm going to advocate for them in the sense that, it should be on a case-by-case basis, and they need to show that they have been directly affected, not just blanket 6 months out. Respectfully, some people will take advantage of this. I don't think most will. I think there's a legitimate need for this, And
Well-
6 months out is a good thing to do, but I also think that the business should come forward and show what the need is and that they have been directly impacted by this, and do it in an open and transparent manner.
Yeah, I don't think there's a way to take advantage of it, because at the end of the day, they're not getting a waiver of any payments, and at the end, they're also gonna have that much more interest on top. So, you know, this is not free money, and it's not a free pass to say we're gonna forgive 6 payments or whatever. It's just to say that if you need a break for 6 months, you can take it, but at the end, we still get our money, and we are gonna make more in interest. So, I don't know that there's the opportunity for much abuse.
I don't know if it's so much of abuse, I just don't want to take where somebody could have that habit of a possibility of defaulting on the loan for whatever reason. And I want it to be forward as far as a case-by-case basis and legitimate concern and need that, hey, I really need to have this happen, and let it
You
be
want the
shown.
decision to be- The decision should be made by the staff, is that where you're at, not the mayor?
I'm going at that, yes, and not the mayor.
Okay, Mr. Peckham?
Pat, do you want to restate your motion, because I lost where you were at?
Mr. Peckham, I want to be sure that, you know, what you've heard is in line with your intent. If there's anything you've heard that you want to change for your original motion, because I'm going to ask for verification that you're happy with the motion and the way it's been presented by staff, and then I'll ask the same of Mr. Gisselman. Mr. Peckham?
I guess, yeah, thank you. I think the easiest thing would be to just add to the resolution that, you know, the deferrals are approved by staff, by community development staff, for any city-funded loan to commercial properties on a case-by-case basis. Just
Thank you.
specify that this is going to be an administrative function, not a political function.
Thank you.
That it be for 6 months.
Thank you. And I just got a nod from Mr. Gisselman on that.
Thank you, and that's basically what the resolve says in the resolution, that, and we're changing the resolve, you know, so that it's now the administration instead of the mayor. It's still case by case, and it's for up to 6 months. So I think basically the public, in looking at the packet and the resolution, can understand that that's where the resolution is headed for
Yep.
this evening.
Okay.
Am I understanding that correctly?
I would say so, yes. As a matter of
Yes,
fact,
we're good.
at this point, I would be happy to go to voting on the ED committee on this issue. City attorney has stepped to the stand.
I'm sorry, I was trying to stay out of this fray, but I'm going to add, as the resolution, I know you're making a motion now, but as the resolution read that went to council, it just talked about the period for which loan payments would be deferred. It didn't put any limits on the authority of the then mayor or the now CD staff. Yeah, but it's going to have to include more. They can defer it for up to 6 months, but their power is limited to the period for which the emergency exists. That needs to be put in the motion as well, and at the end of that.
Well, there's the emergency period, there's also the impact period.
Well, then you should ferret that out, because 2 years from now, can the community development staff continue to make deferments up to 6 months? I mean, that's what you have to decide. You're authorizing the staff now to make these deferrals for what, the deferrals for up to 6 months.
Yeah.
That's their restriction, but
when do you
for
have
what
to
period of
apply?
time?
Yeah, okay.
And then I think it should only apply to loans in existence at the time the resolution gets passed by council. Those
Yeah.
are my only 2 comments. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's the cleanest way to address Dennis's concerns about other loans that might come in the future, would be to simply say, these are existing loans, and the resolution does say existing, but we'll clarify it's loans that are already in existence when this resolution passed. And we can specify, to Ann's point, that the application or the request by the business needs to happen during the emergency period, which, will, whenever that ends.
Okay, very good. I do believe we have discussed this in great detail, and I would be happy to conduct a vote of the ED committee at this point, if that's okay, because we do have a motion and a second. So I will go ahead and do roll call on this for ED. Mr. Gisselman,
Yes.
Mr. Martins,
Yes.
Ms. Rasmussen,
Aye.
Mr. Peckham,
Aye.
and I vote aye. Thank you.
Okay, I'll accept the same motion from the finance committee. Is there a motion?
Nutting makes the motion.
Motion by Notting, is there a second?
I'll second that.
Second by Martins. Further discussion or questions? Recognizing none, then we'll call the roll. Lawrence?
Aye.
Smith? Martins?
Aye.
Notting?
Aye.
And I'll vote aye as well. That motion passes 5-0.
Very good, thank you. Want to move on to item number 2, Ms. Rasmussen?
Yep, moving along to item 2 is discussion and possible action on a commercial rehab loan and tax increment financing request for the renovation of the tower portion of the Plaza Hotel at 201 North 17th Avenue. This item, I think, was left over from our last meeting, at least in finance it was. And we had had a request from what will become a new owner of the plaza to really shine the place up and split up the property a little bit. So I guess if this one, I guess, Chris, did you want to start us off on the discussion, or Mary Ann, so we can pick up kind of where we left off?
Yeah, of course. So I included a short summary of the project. You know, this is a multi-phased redevelopment proposal that really involves a couple different owners. The existing property is 6.2 acres. Everyone knows the kind of plaza property as it is today. They would divide it into 3 lots. They would sell the northern lot for another redevelopment purpose in the future. They would renovate the existing tower, and then they would tear down, the majority of the kind of 2-story motel court area where the pool and the, ballroom and other pieces are. And that would be sold to Lockery Company to be redeveloped into multifamily housing. So, there's the first agenda item, we broke it into 2 agenda items, but they do have to kind of move in tandem because the sale of the property is part of the equity to renovate the hotel. So it's important for both of the projects to be viewed holistically and to redevelop the whole, and to get the whole site redeveloped in a comprehensive way. So,
For
go ahead.
clarification, did the ED committee, I thought, acted on this already when they were still meeting in person before WebEx, but we were waiting on finance action, is that right?
So yes, the ED committee reviewed the loan portion, which is basically a TIF loan at the commercial rehab loan rates. But we also said that we were, going to come back to the finance committee and talk more about the financing, the TIF financing piece, because that's, again, they're important to talk about both elements. The loan, there's a loan and a 1 year of reverse increment, associated with the renovation of the hotel. And then there is the reverse payments associated with the redevelopment of the old part of the building that's being torn down into the apartments.
Correct. Now, so we only need finance action on item 2 and 3 then, is that correct?
No, I think it's important that we have both committees review it, because ED had reviewed part of the loan application, like I said, for the hotel, but didn't necessarily review or didn't vote on, kind of on the reverse incentive for the apartments. So it's important that, we kind of clarify them and be sure that everyone understands the ramification. And it's important that we're voting on them together because one can't happen without the other. We can't, you can't do the hotel project without the apartments being approved, so.
So that said then, I mean, heaven knows that the plaza has needed some attention for quite some time, and that it's been in a state of decline, and that parts of the hotel are borderline blighted. And so, this project certainly makes sense for a commercial rehab. I guess, do we have anybody within the finance committee have questions on this item that they'd like to ask about the proposal that's in the packet?
Mr. Smith has his hand up.
Go ahead, Dennis.
Okay, the gentleman that has applied for the commercial rehabilitation loan, he is presently the owner of this property?
He's one of the owners, but it's, there's a partnership that owns it. He would buy out the other owners and then be the sole owner to do the renovation.
Okay, so has a partner, so he's not the sole owner at the present time?
Correct.
Okay. It looks like the majority of what he's doing is renovating the existing tower with 60, he started out with 60 rooms, he's going to end up with 60 rooms. Since this is an increment loan, where we're supposed to give $50,000 back, will this improvement, you think, produce the increment that we need to give back to him?
Yeah, so great question. It's, under the proposal, he's entitled to a year of the increment not to exceed that amount. And if it generates that much, then he gets that much. If it generates less, then he gets whatever the 1 year of increment is.
Okay.
Because, we're not sure what it's going to assess for. You're right that with renovation projects, it's hard to discern how much it will assess for on the other side, because they'll pump $1 million and $1.4 million into the project, but that doesn't necessarily mean doesn't mean the assessment of it will rise by $1.4 million.
You'll probably get it, because I remodeled 2 bathrooms, put a roof on, and my taxes went up $400.
So we just don't, we're not going to make any guarantees. So you're entitled to it if you get it, so.
Okay.
And I think the other exciting part of this project is that if that hotel is completely renovated and branded Best Western, we may see an uptick in room tax dollars as well. I think that when events were coming to town, they were tending to choose other newer hotels first, and not necessarily that hotel, which is prominently located. So hopefully we would see economic impact in more than one way. And as events start to regather themselves, once this is all over with, we maybe would see better room nights coming out of that facility than what we've been getting.
For sure. And we've highlighted previously, too, that it actually benefits the city that they're eliminating some of the rooms in the motel court area and all that, which are very uncompetitive rooms anyways, but drag down the city's total room count, or rather prop it up and drag down our ability to finance other hotels in the market, because it looks like we have a lot of hotel rooms, but those are really uncompetitive hotel rooms that aren't very marketable. So as Lisa noted, there's a majority of the property that is significantly blighted. It's been through foreclosure. It's been challenged in trying to come up with a solution, and it's so large that it's hard to bite off, right? So that's why we've worked with both of the parties to come up with a solution that's really twofold: renovate the portions of the hotel that are worthy of renovation, and then tear down the rest and, potentially see it be developed into something else. And obviously, housing has been one of our key issues, and I think, it would be a marketable area for more multifamily housing as well. So that it makes logical sense for that to be apartments rather than a hotel space or something else.
Sure. Any additional questions from finance? Do we have, if not, do we have a motion from the finance committee to approve?
You have a
Nutting will
motion?
make that motion.
Motion by Nutting, is there a second?
Mr. Smith had his hand up.
Second by Smith?
I have a request to speak from Mr. Gisselman, I think.
So how are we doing this? Christian, you saying that you want this holistic. I have an issue with the apartment development. So does that mean thus that I would be voting against both of them? Because I want to clear that I don't think at this point in time, with the city's continual development and promotion of apartments and and apartment houses, I mean, there's really going to be no end to it. And I think that before too long, I think the city should really, Economic Development Committee and the administration itself, take a look at where are we going? Where do we want to be with 3 to 4 to 5 different spots within the city today, and I'm sure that there's going to be more down the road. And are we in a position, as these come to the city, as these projects come to the city, to say, yes, we're going to be supporting these? I think that we have to take a serious look at where we're going with the city's cooperation with housing development. Private housing, go to it. That's very fine, but I think the city should be very careful as we go forward, because I think that we're almost, and this committee of the city council doesn't see every proposal that does come through. Community development looks at those, but I think that we should, seriously think about our continued development of high-end housing when we should be seriously thinking about other types of housing within the city, affordable middle-income housing. I think that there's a desperate need for the city, and we do help. I understand that, Christian. I understand that there's different programs, but this continual development of, I have an issue with the continued development of high market housing that I think is, I think it needs to be studied. Thank you. So I will be voting against both of those proposals.
Yeah, well, again, you can vote for the hotel if you wish and vote against the other proposal, but to be clear, we're just specifying that, for the project to really take place here, the council as a whole does need to approve both of the pieces, because they move in tangent. But if you like one proposal, you don't have to like every aspect of the proposal. But just to clarify, the goal, obviously, our participation on these market rate projects needs to be a very fair participation. So, we've encouraged applicants to request no more than 10% of TIF resources to this project. And this project especially involves the demolition of a very large concrete bunker, basically, that is sitting out there that's quite blighted. And so the expense of the demolition is significant. It's a classic use of tax increment financing resources to try to offset the expenses of that. They could easily go build their apartments on another site where it doesn't require a huge demolition of a blighted building that's going to be quite expensive to tear down, And so I think it's when you evaluate that and you say, this clears up a major blight issue. We did the same at Mountain Lanes. At Mountain Lanes, it was a bit less in our participation. It was under 10%, more like 8%. But again, that helped offset the fact that they had to tear down that building and the site, had to be regraded and redone for redevelopment purposes. So we're trying to strike fair deals on these. As you also know, we're doing major projects on affordable housing too. We're obviously supporting the renovation of the Landmark, which will be more restricted housing units in the history of the city being renovated. In that one project alone has more units than Trolley Quarter, the Federal Building, and the Atrium Loft projects all combined. So, we are adding more affordable units, and we do need to add more affordable units, and I think that's very true. Of course, if we were using TIF incentives to incentivize the creation of affordable units, it would have to cost much more than 10%, and I think that's fairly well documented that it would have to be a more significant participation. And, in this case, our goal is trying to crack the challenge of the plaza and to see the area add taxable value. This will be a significant improvement in the current plaza assessment. The whole property, all 6 acres of it today, only assesses for $1.8 million in total assessment. So, and that's where the value or the power of all this lies, is that after they do a major renovation, sell off the northern parcel, which that will could be used for a variety of different uses, and then build $17 million worth of new apartments, that adds a significant amount of taxable value that we're just not capturing today because the property is blighted.
I think we really need to keep in mind at all times that, developers know they're operating in a competitive environment. They know that there's a market out there that they want a piece of, and they know that that market, if it reaches a saturation point or goes beyond it, then that goes against their own self-interest. So developers, they come up with these proposals within the context of ROI in a market. If it's not marketable, they're not going to do it. I don't know that, where we sit, not being developers, can really gauge the sanity of their proposal, because they're the ones looking at market, looking at ROI. We can look at it from, a wish list of what we would like to see done and regarding lower, middle, and upper level residential needs. But I think that is our strategy, and that is what we keep working towards with some success. But if a developer comes along with something like this, that, we can look at the numbers and see the benefits, the removal of blight, increase of taxable value and revenue to the city, and the developer feels that they're providing something that there's a demand for, then I think we're pretty much beholden from an ED standpoint to embrace that. So.
Well, so just to clarify, in the South Riverfront Plan, you'll remember we did do a housing study just this year, right, to look at the housing issue. Because, Gary's point is right. A couple of years ago when we first adopted the strategy in ED to try to diversify housing choice in the city, and that was a very conscious effort, there weren't a lot of urban infill projects going on, right? When we first did the first row houses project, that was kind of novel, and it was like, wow, okay, that's, and subsequently, we've done a series of them now, and Swiderski built their building with our assistance, and River Life is wrapping up nicely, and, moving along. Savo Supply was successfully renovated. Row houses on Thomas Street, on 3rd Street, additional things, and now proposed townhomes at the North Riverfront and stuff like that as well. So there's been a variety of housing things, but that housing study did highlight that Wausau is well behind what would be considered our peers or what we should have had in multifamily units already. And so, they're saying with the deficit that in the next 10 years, Wausau needs to add, the Wausau region needs to add, 1,000 units of multifamily housing to keep pace with market expectations. And that might seem high to folks, but that is true. And it's mainly true because we've been behind our other peer communities when you're comparing us to, to other locations. And so our region really does need to add more of these housing units. And we've been purposely trying to say we'd like to see those units in the city because, one, it adds diversity of our housing choices, and two, it adds significant taxable value. The best generator of taxes for the levy is residents, right? Or people that are living, in their houses or living in their townhomes or renting their apartments, because those residents are the ones that are really paying the bills at the end of the day. And having more of those residents in the city is very important. So we've tried to be aggressive on that, and that means that, we try to participate fairly with this. But, similarly, if you look at Raleigh's project at Mountain Lanes, we approved a very similar package to what the Village of Plover approved for Raleigh for his project there as well. So, I want to be real clear that Wausau is not over-enriching projects. We participate at a fair rate, and there are other communities that throw much more money at developers to get these projects going. And some of them have splashier or bigger projects to show for it. But I think we do try to strike that balance and participate fairly. And, if a developer comes forward and says they are willing to invest in the community, it seems like our participation at 10%, especially when you're looking at something that will be worth $17 million at the end of the day, is a real significant, addition to the city, especially on a property that's blighted and paying nothing right now, or very little, let's say.
Lisa, Alder Lawrence has her hand up.
To be clear, we have a motion and a second on the floor from finance on agenda item number 2. We'll recognize Linda's question, and then we'll take a vote on behalf of finance, recognizing that item 2 is the hotel and item 3 is the apartment. So if you wanted to pick and choose which you like, you could vote differently on 2 and 3. Linda, go ahead.
I was just going to remind us that we had a motion on the floor for the.
Yeah, sorry, my tangent.
No, it's all useful.
So with a motion and a second on the floor from finance, is there any additional questions or comment from finance?
Michael, did you have a question? Anyone else have questions? Okay. Assuming no questions.
Other questions?
Okay, all right, so we're good on that then. So with a motion and a second on the floor for agenda item number 2 to approve, members in finance, we're gonna call the roll here. Lawrence?
Aye.
Smith?
Aye.
Martin?
Aye.
Nutting?
Nutting votes aye.
And I'll vote aye as well. That motion passes 5-0 in finance.
Thank you, Ms. Rasmussen. I would entertain a motion from the ED Committee for the same, item number 2.
I would make that motion.
I have a motion from Peckham. Do I have a second, please?
I'll second.
We have a second. Further discussion? Seeing none, I will call the roll. Gisselman.
Yes.
Peckham.
Aye.
Rasmussen.
Aye.
Martins.
Aye.
And I vote aye. Thank you very much. Want to take us along, Lisa?
Sure. So item number 3 is discussion and possible action on the tax increment financing request for the demolition and proposed multifamily residential project as part of the current Plaza Hotel at 201 North 17th Avenue. And so this is really part 2 of what we were just talking about, and recognizing that while we do want more low-income housing in town, we want to focus on that. I guess the one comment that I would have as I was listening to Chris and to Mr. Gisselman on the previous item was that developers, it takes a certain developer to engage in a affordable housing project because they need to be heavily subsidized to be profitable, and most market rate developers then will shy away from them. But that said, those requests also often come with a pretty lofty list of demands from the developer to make those profitable, where we don't see quite that lucrative package for market rate developers. And our experience with market rate has been that they have been leasing up as fast as they're built. So there has to be a market there that we've been missing before. And I've heard from many that said that at one point when they moved to Wausau, their ability to get a market rate unit when they didn't want to own a house, but wanted an upscale rental was limited. And so that caused many professionals to move out to the suburbs. And so that said, this project again addresses some of that bleed and really would enhance what's become, like Chris said, a blighted part of that property. I guess, do we have questions or comment from the Finance Committee before we seek a motion?
Well, I think, Madam Chair, you're right in everything you say there, and I think it would be best to make the motion and then have discussion after that, so I'd like to make the motion for that. And one of the pluses of this proposal here is that it's on the bus line.
It is.
The bus goes right past the building, so I'll make that motion, Madam Chair.
Motion from Nutting to approve, is there a second?
I'll second.
We have a second from Lawrence.
Second by Lawrence. Then recognizing, is there any further discussion or questions? from
Mr.
the
Martins
audience?
has his hand up, and Mr. Smith has his hand up.
Okay, let's recognize Mike Martins first and then Dennis Smith.
Oh, I don't have it. I don't have anything else.
Oh,
Okay.
maybe just take your hand down then from the thing, if you can.
All right, Mr. Smith then.
His hand is stuck.
Thank you.
Okay, Dennis, go ahead.
I agree with Gary. We do need more modest-priced housing for people. Chris is right. They're renovating the old Wausau Hotel, and that's going to help a lot, but that's not for families. Nobody wants to have your 2 kids playing on the 4th floor of an apartment building. You want something where they can get out and to a park or so on. I'm concerned about this project because it looks like we're gonna, at 10%, it's still a lot of money, and I agree, the end game is impressive. However, are any of these apartments, and I know we don't have the contractors here, are any of these apartments set up for seniors or set up for more modest families and so on? These developers run into a problem. They may overbuild and they may find out, I was going to rent this property for $1,025 a month, but there's so many apartments out there, he can't get it. He may have to end it for $650 a month because $650 a month is better than $0 a month. So there is a risk that these contractors aren't always right. The people that built the Titanic weren't right. It really wasn't unsinkable.
And Raleigh is on the phone if you'd like. He could, Raleigh, are you there? Would you like to answer that question? Did you hear it?
Yeah, I'm here. Sure.
Great.
I can comment. Yeah, I mean, a lot of great discussion on all levels. I just compliment everybody. I agree with really with everything I've heard. I do agree with the thought as far as needing more different levels of housing, and we're even looking into doing that in the future. But it's finding the right project, the right building, the right location that kind of matches the type of housing that you're going to be doing. But your question about the rents, development, there is a risk. You're right. As far as the potential of rents, do you know exactly they're going to fill up? No, we don't. That's the crazy part of the business that I'm in, which is obviously good and bad. But personally, I do feel that Wausau has been underserved as far as to have nicer units like this. That's why we're building the Mountain Lane project right next door. We feel this would just be adding on to that, and we would share some common amenities in these new projects, which would enhance them all. And the other thing in these 2 buildings, we would be putting some units in that actually would be a little more affordable than what's in Mountain Lanes. So it answers a little bit of what you're saying. So we would have more unit types, and we would have some units that would go down that actually would be less rent. Still high level of finishes, very nice units, but we would design them to be for the rents to be a little bit lower to create a better absorption to the community and better absorption and success of our project. Hopefully that answers your question. So we would have a wider price range in these 2 buildings than we do in Mountain Lane.
All right, are these, just to further that, excuse me, are these suitable for families, a couple that has a child or maybe 2 children or so on?
Well, there'd be a good question. And what our thought is, because we don't really want this building to compete with Mountain Lanes in a sense. So we would have a range. We would have some smaller units that are there, and we would have some larger units that are there. So we would have, and I think we'll end up with some 3-bedroom units. We have 1s and 2s only in Mountain Lanes, and so we would end up with some units that, like I say, would be on the smaller side, and we would go larger. So basically, it would be a little bit different product than what's in Mountain Lanes. They wouldn't be like direct competition. So it would give you a broader spread. So you could have somebody with families there. And your other comment about retirees, I see retired people living in the buildings also. It'd be a nice place for all ages, what it's meant for. And the location is superb, as we know. It's handy with the grocery store right across the street. You can walk to services. It's handy to get on the highways. Views there are very good. So there's just a lot of pluses. It's a nice place to live.
Oh, great. Thank you.
Alder Lawrence has her hand up.
Thank you for all your efforts.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lockery. Any other comment or question?
Alder Lawrence has her hand up.
Yes, thank you. I have a few comments and then a question about the but-for. I just first want to extend my sympathies, Raleigh, for the recent death of your mother. So we're thinking of you about that.
Yeah, thank you very much, Linda.
Sure.
Thank you.
Just as a point of disclosure, I used to work for Raleigh 100 years ago.
Oh.
And I do know that Raleigh does his due diligence. He builds excellent quality projects, so I don't think we have anything to worry about in that basis. In terms of, some of the comments about do we have enough high-income or low-income rentals in the city, I look at this as almost a way to redistribute income, where we're lucky to have, well-heeled, experienced developers who want to build in Wausau. And a lot of people would object to our participation at all. And so I want to address the but-for, due diligence that staff has done. But without the influx of new tax base like this, no matter what the income of the developer or the income of the people who are going to live there, the tax base is a basis for many, many years in which the city will collect taxes and redistribute that in terms of services to all people. So we need a balance. I don't see it as an either-or in terms of how we use our resources. And the resources are really coming from the development, obviously, that's occurring in the TIF district. So I think it's a good project. And then, Christian, before we vote, if you would just address that, because we've been criticized recently for not being careful enough about the but-for clause.
Sure. Well, I think, and that's a consistent critique of TIF as a whole, is that, there aren't very defined definitions of the but-for. That's something that you, as the council members, make that finding in your resolution. You're saying, in the wording of that resolution when it's approved, that this project wouldn't happen without the city's participation at that at that level. And I think obviously Raleigh would attest to that it wouldn't be able to happen at that level. But one thing I think we've done well in Wausau is to make sure that we are tying it to projects that are on complicated sites or that have valid documented issues with the properties. Okay, we haven't created a TIF district out in a cornfield and then given TIF incentives to housing out there. We haven't. We've went on those kind of projects. At Swiderski, for example, we assisted with we used some TIF resources to demolish the Roats property, obviously, which was a very blighted building that was infamously so in the city. And then we assisted them in buying the property. And then, they went ahead and added that great, the building that's there now, which is a great addition, I think, to the city. At Mountain Lanes, at River Life, obviously, the, kind of casebook definition of a blighted property with environmental issues, with foundation issues, with lots of issues, that needed to be addressed to develop it into anything of value. If, everyone remembers that it was literally vacant properties and metal tin sheds down there. So it was, adding nothing to the tax roll. And now, that building is a significant addition to the tax roll. So, that's really the key. The key that makes this work is that the plaza is in such terrible condition. I think everyone acknowledges that. They acknowledge that most of the plaza is unrenovatable, and if you've been there recently, you can attest to that and say, look, what are we going, this is just a drag. And, it's already been through foreclosure. So, the current ownership structure isn't going to be able to fund the demolition costs of, this property. It's going to weigh on them. And so that's the role of often the role of a city is to help, address that imperfect situation in the market. And Raleigh is stepping forward to say, yes, I'll do it, but, I can go to another community. I could go to Weston and buy a cornfield and build a building for far less than it will take me to build, to build on this site, because I have to tear down a significant building. And that building is made like a missile barrier. I mean, it's a very significant building to tear down. So I think when we were evaluating the demo quotes alone, for the property, it's very easy to look at that and say, okay, yes, there's clearly a but-for challenge here, just as there was at those other examples that the council has, over the years made that call, and kind of said, yes, we understand that,
Mr. Gisselman.
I think we've gone through a lot of high-end housing, and as we go forward into the new city council, perhaps at some point in time, this committee, Economic Development and Finance, the administration may want to just peruse and just see what is available for projects with regard to moderate or low-income housing. I don't think that we've seen very many of those. If it makes a little nudge up with more development from the city or more help from the city, so be it. Bring it to the city council and see where we are. But, we haven't, that's sort of my wish, that I think we should start to really be addressing that. And I think that I still will continue to have my issues with this development. I think we've gone far enough, and that's why I'll be voting no.
Yeah, which, again, I appreciate that, and we totally agree. We're always looking to partner with the developer to do an affordable housing project. They aren't easy. They aren't easy to finance, especially new build, because on a new build project, you don't have the additional tool of historic tax credits as well. And oftentimes, our most successful examples have been when you can blend both of those, the low-income housing tax credits and the historic tax credits. And so that's why, again, I want to reiterate that under this council and under this current term, with the approval of the renovation of the landmark, we will add more low-income housing tax credit restricted units in the city than ever before combined. To be very clear, I mean, this is, at Landmark, there will be 96 units. That's more than Trolley Quarter, Savo Supply, and the Federal Building all combined. So we are adding a significant amount of low-income housing tax credit units in the city of Wausau, in one massive building. One building that's also very blighted, as you know, or very challenged, needs a good renovation. And of course, you and I both appreciate the fact that it's historic and we need to preserve it. So I'm very, I want to be clear that our goal is to do that, and we'd be glad to work with other developers to try to add more units, which would be great, because I think the housing study shows that we do need more affordable housing units, but we are doing that, and we will add a record amount of affordable housing units in the city, this term. A record amount, so.
Can I just answer?
We have a motion and a second on the floor from finance, so if finance has no additional comment, we could go ahead and vote.
Ms. Rasmussen, Gisselman still had a follow-up before your vote, please.
Christian, how many high-end housing or apartments have been added to the city of Wausau within the last, or the potential, how many have been added to the city in, for instance, 2019 or 2020? Quite a bit. I don't know those numbers, but
Also a record number of that as well. Again, these are both records, they're both,
good.
right? I mean,
It's all good.
but these are not they're not mutually exclusive. We need to add both both higher-end housing choices for professionals and empty nesters who want to become renters and filling that need, and that's what the market study says. And we also need to add more affordable housing units, and we're going to do that hopefully at Ponderosa as well, where we're going to add affordable housing units there. I think, there's the affordable piece is by its nature unaffordable to build, so it's always challenging and it often needs incentives. But we're working to do that, and we need to add record amounts of both. We really do, and I think we have done that. And we're amenable in the continued strategy discussions to say, let's take our foot maybe a bit off the gas on market rate and more onto affordable housing, or maybe increase our incentives for affordable housing. But just to be clear, that means we have to be comfortable probably putting down more than, our 10% participation. We're very proud of Savo Supply and the renovation that went on there, but it took a significant amount of resources to renovate, those units. And our participation in that project is far higher than 10%, and so it was worth it, I think, right? And I think we can appreciate the project on its merits, but we do have to be comfortable with allocating, more resources, and so we're just trying to strike a fair balance.
Okay. So with that, are we ready for a vote in finance then? All right, we've got a motion and a second on the floor. We'll call the roll for finance. Lawrence?
Aye.
Smith?
Aye.
Martins?
Aye.
Nutting?
Aye.
And I'll vote aye as well. That motion passes 5-0.
Thank you.
That brings us,
Need to do the ED portion of that. I would entertain a motion from the Economic Development Committee for this item.
I'll make the motion, Tom.
Okay, I have a motion from Rasmussen. Do I have a second, please?
I would second it. I have a question, if I may.
Yes?
Under the TIF application for this one, the additional considerations, there are 6 questions, and Chris will know that 2 of them were not answered.
Yes.
Number 1 and number 5. And I'm wondering if Chris could explain to us the ramifications of the first question on signing a community workforce agreement with the local building trades council. The developer didn't say yes or no to that, but I assume that the lack of a yes is a no. What is that first question? What will that entail?
Sure. So, yeah, just to, we added this as part of the renovation or improvement of the city's TIF application a few years ago. And, the administration advocated for that, that question specifically because that means basically that you would hire a union workforce and that you would, the local building trade council is, you'd work to sign an agreement and you would focus on hiring union workers for the project. So, we encourage that, or we're asking you to kind of define whether you will or you won't, just like we're asking you to kind of also talk about, would you pursue energy efficiency improvements? Would you do these other things? And, we thoughtfully, if you remember, thoughtfully put that in as a yes or no kind of thing for you to self-declare so that, the council could weigh an understanding of whether you would pursue that or not. So I don't believe that they would pursue a union, workforce necessarily at the project. So that's just for your consideration, as you consider that. And then,
Okay.
and then 5 is, 5, as you know, is property assessed clean energy. That's a pot of financing that's available from, basically from the state and federal government, which can be used to finance a project. I think it's, Raleigh likes to, I don't know if Raleigh wants to chime in, but usually he likes to do fairly clean financing on his projects, with his resources. He won't be accessing that program. He could if he wanted to, but, he's saying here that he's not necessarily saying yes to it.
I'll comment on that also. Our intention is to do, obviously, the energy efficiency at high standards in the building. That we're doing, but we typically don't use PACE financing. It's not typically used with apartments. It's very commonly used with hotels, but not apartments. I'm very familiar with it. We've done it on hotel projects, but like I said, not with multifamily.
Okay, thank you for the information.
Sure. You can use it for multifamily, but I agree that it's less common, so, yeah.
Okay, well, we did have a motion from Peckham. Did I receive a second from ED?
No, the motion was from me and the second was from Peckham.
Oh,
Yes.
okay, very good. Thank you for clarifying that. Further discussion? Seeing no hands, I would call a roll call. Gisselman.
No.
Rasmussen.
Aye.
Martins.
Aye.
Peckham.
Aye.
And I vote aye. Thank you. Takes us to our 4th item.
Okay, our 4th item is discussion and possible action on approving an application to the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development to become a HUD-approved housing counseling agency. And in reading this in the packet, it really does sound like an opportunity for us to further serve a population that needs to be served and make processes easier. So, this is also something that we had on our agenda, I think, last time that was carried over that we didn't get to.
Yeah, so this is just a quick thing. It's, we've passed a resolution similar to this before, but HUD has changed some of the semantics, and rather than use the term certified, would like to use the term approved. So we're just reiterating that with this resolution.
Okay, is there a motion from within finance to approve?
You have a motion from Lawrence.
Motion by Nutting, is there a second?
There was two on the floor here, Lawrence and Dennis.
Okay, we'll go second by Smith. Any discussion or questions from finance? Seeing none, finance is equipped to vote then on the item. We'll roll call vote. Lawrence?
Aye.
Smith?
Yes.
Martins?
Aye.
Nutting?
Aye, Nutting, aye.
Vote aye as well, and that item passes 5-0.
Thank you. I will entertain the same motion from ED, please.
I would make that motion, and it does look like just kind of a housekeeping thing as far as how we title this thing or describe it in our
Thank you.
documents. So,
A second, please. I have a second from Gisselman. Roll call vote. Gisselman.
Yes.
Peckham.
Aye.
Rasmussen.
Aye.
Martins.
Aye.
And I vote aye. I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I
have one
would
from-
make that one.
I have one from Gisselman. I have a second I'll take from Peckham. And roll call on that from ED. Peckham.
Aye.
Rasmussen.
Aye.
Tom, we have
We have what?
someone has inquired about making a comment.
On what?
I'm sorry, I'm not seeing, where did this come from? I think it arrived by, but shouldn't they have been chiming in?
What are you getting?
Hold on, I think I just received an email on it, but I'm not sure. But is someone on the line?
There is somebody on the line, but we mute anybody who calls in, only council members are able to participate during the meeting.
Okay, I think Deb Ryan has emailed and requested to make a comment. Do you want to
Okay. Is her-
entertain the comment?
Is her comment contained in the email that you can read it into the record, Chris?
No, she just said she'd like to make a comment.
Okay,
Forgive me, I'm not sure the
So
process
the,
then for doing that.
The agenda does say that comment needs to be emailed to Christian Sharp prior to the start of the meeting, and it would be read at that time.
Okay. It's,
Did we receive an email prior to the meeting?
no. The email just arrived now, but I'm not sure what caller,
Well, it's probably,
Well, okay, given that we've taken action on all actionable items except adjournment, I'd have to say that that email will be out of order and can be addressed in council subsequently.
okay, yeah, I guess it's important to clarify that, with this new process, that the notice says that the email has to be done so in person, or, has to arrive, before the meeting, and then we would be sure to include your public comment.
Sure.
Opportunity in the meeting.
Okay.
Is that clear, I think? Is that correct, Ann? Okay, we do want to be thoughtful and make sure that everyone has the opportunity to participate with these kind of meetings, but to be clear, you have to email in advance your notice that you'd like to comment so that we can be sure to schedule that at the appropriate time for the agenda item, because
Thank you.
we're now at the end of the agenda, so.
I'd like to, again, go, Mr.
Tom,
Gissman.
what, I would think if Ann could just so that we are very clear with everything, if Ann could just explain that at the microphone so that everybody understands exactly what the rules were coming into this, and that Ann can,
It does say, It does say on the agenda, any person wishing to offer public comment who does not appear in person to do so may email Christian Schock with Joint Finance and Economic Development Committee public comment in the subject line prior to the meeting start. All public comment, either by email or in person, will be limited to items appearing on the agenda at this time. So I would assume that by that, if somebody were here in person, they'd be more visible to us and could raise their hand and come up to the podium to make a comment as each item occurs, to make public comment on that item. But under this format, they really do need to submit it before the meeting start, and then he can give those to the chair. It says all messages related to agenda items received prior to the start of the meeting will be provided to the chair. So then you're on notice for anybody you can't see that they have a comment, and you can read it at the appropriate time into the record before that agenda item.
Thank you so much.
Thank
I
you.
hope that answers the questions of those on the line.
And bear in mind, everything we're acting on here tonight, or have acted on, will be going to council, and there's an opportunity there to hear your voice. Okay, I would like to go back to the beginning of the roll call, just to be sure we're covering it. So this was our motion to adjourn. Peckham?
Aye.
Okay, thank you. Rasmussen?
Aye.
Gisselman?
Aye.
Martins?
Aye.
And I vote aye. So the ED portion of this committee meeting is adjourned.
Same motion from finance, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion by Nutting.
Motion by Nutting, is there a second?
Second from Smith?
Second by Smith. We'll call the roll. Lauren?
Aye.
Smith?
Yes.
Martin?
Aye.
Nutting?
Aye.
I'll vote aye as well. The committee will stand adjourned with a vote of 5-0. Thanks, everyone.
Aye.